So I'm going to be talking about Android in cars. There are other approaches to getting apps in cars. Tesla, for example, are very big on using web views. A lot of their stuff comes through a browser. You can do the same thing on Android Automotive. You can't do it with Android Auto, but with Android Automotive you can write web wrappers. You can use our trusty friend, the web view, and load web pages into it. It's not a fantastic experience. There are companies who are doing it. It's better than nothing, but it certainly is a long way from delivering what Android can provide as a native experience. So the two main things when we talk about Android in cars that people think of are Android Automotive OS, which is the OS running in the car. So Android is on the head unit. And Android Auto, where the actual application is running on the phone and it is projected to the head unit. So the main difference between these two, if you look at Google's training materials, is where what is called the template host runs. So the template host is the thing that powers a lot of the templated apps you'll see when folk talk about automotive apps. With Android Auto, this template host runs on the phone. With Android Automotive, it runs natively in the car. And that is the big difference. So you can write apps that will run on both. It's not a case of you have to decide whether you run in the car or whether you run on the phone. You can run on both with a templated app. Or if you want to go all in, and a lot of companies who are producing cars are looking for all-in solutions, you can write native apps that will run on Android Automotive OS in the vehicle. Android Auto is kind of the long-term solution. Some of you may have tinkered with cars in the past and replaced head units and all this kind of thing. The thinking is in the longer term that instead of replacing the head unit of a car, once you have Android Auto running, you can just buy a new phone. You no longer have to wire everything in. You just buy your new phone, buy a Nexus 7, a few years down the line, buy a Nexus 9, and all of a sudden your head unit has got more power, can do more things, purely because it is using Android Auto and it is projected from the phone to the car itself. The thing that some people think about is Google's Assistant in driving mode. This is something that's I'm not going to cover because it is it's falling away. Google Maps no longer supports it. It's a solution for when people haven't got Android Auto available to them and they're not running Android Automotive OS. But the idea of clipping a phone into a holder of some kind and then trying to look at it is something that doesn't fit well with distraction-free driving experiences. So Google Assistant in driving mode works. You can use it. It's a fallback, but it is very much a targeted solution. You're not going to take a Google Assistant or Google Assistant skill, if you like, and take it onto Android Automotive OS and have it running natively in the head unit, even when you haven't got a network connection. So it's worth thinking about, but for this talk, and in most cases, I'd say it's not something you want to really look at if you're looking at an in-vehicle experience. If you're looking at Google Assistant in a more broader context, yeah, it can be an add-on. It's great. But if you're not looking at doing Google Assistant apps, it's not something I'd recommend. And as I said, Android Auto is the projected version. This makes it very easy to upgrade the hardware, but there are downsides to it. I'll cover those in a bit. It's a great first step because templated apps do make it very easy for you to get something into a car. But similarly, there are a lot of issues. I don't know, put your hands up if you've used Android Auto. Yeah, cool. Number of people. How many of you had setup problems? Put your hands up. Yep. Number of people as well. And the thing to remember is this is a largely technical audience. If you now think about non-technical people setting things up, what you'll find is that they go, well, I can get my map from my car. It may not be the latest map. It may not be great, but I'll make do with that. So Android Auto is good, but there are issues with setting it up. And when you're looking at a wider market, like your average person on the street, your average person with a car. It's best to find people who aren't technical. Technical people love to tweak around with things and poke at the corners of technical problems. Most people would just look at it and go, well, it didn't work. I'll ask the person I know who knows about this Android thing when they come round, and then they'll probably forget about it. So Android Auto has a whole list of compatible vehicles and stereos. There are too many to name at the moment. There are 500 models. If you think about that, that's most second-hand car dealerships' forecourts worth. Most models comes with Android Auto now. It was the first step into cars for Google. It's worked very well for them. It's got them a lot of good relationships that they could build on, and it's a reasonably good solution. But as we were mentioning, it's not an easy thing to set up. It also is not always 100% reliable. I don't know if some of you folk have used the wireless setup systems and had issues where when you set up the wireless connection, it'll work and then it may drop, and there are the natural kind of issues you'll get in a car. For those of you who don't know, in cars there are automotive specifications for how things should talk to each other and the amount of interference they get from other components. Sometimes you'll find that even Bluetooth won't work well when you're inside a car. It's just a natural situation. So the market. This is last year's slide. Last year there were 100 million plus cars on the road that had Android Auto. Now that's not the same as the 2.5 billion, 3 billion phones and tablets, but if I was making £1 off of every one of these 100 million devices every year, I'm not going to be complaining there's only 100 million cars on the road. Even 1% of that, if you're making £1 a year from a service, is £1 million a year. Sometimes it's not about the total size of the market, it's just about where people are. And when they're in a car, they want specific experiences. You've got a captive audience. So as car charging becomes more common, as people have the age-old thing of waiting to pick someone up or those kind of situations, you have opportunities there. You also have opportunities while people are driving around. Now, I said this was last year's slide. It's now 150 million. That's 150 million pounds a year if you're making £1 per device, or 1.5 million pounds per year if you're making £1 off of 1% of those devices. So in that 1 year, you've seen a 50% increase in the number of users, just by the fact that there's a 50% increase in people who have Android Auto cars in front of them. And 2021 was not an easy year. There are chip shortages. There are problems with the pandemic still, and that affecting production runs and people being able to physically build cars. You may see there are some models of car now that you can go into a dealership and ask for a specific car. The Mercedes EQ is an example. And you may be looking at a year to 18 months from when you order it to when it's delivered. There are manufacturers who are slowing down their development plans because they cannot deliver the cars before they think they'll ship the next model. The biggest nightmare for car manufacturers is taking orders, getting to when they can deliver it in 18 months' time, having a new model that's already being released, and the customer going, don't want that one anymore, I want the new one. Because they can no longer really sell that as a new car because everyone's going to want the new one, and everyone's going to join the back of a 12, 18 months waiting list. So seeing 50% increase in the year where it's been tough means that when things come back to a reasonable position, which may be a few years' time, I'm not going to try and say 2022 is going to have cars flying out of factories faster than you've ever seen it before. We're going to expect to see 50 million plus cars a year added to that. In a normal year, so 2018, 2019, pre-pandemic, I say normal, old normal rather than new normal, there were 76 million cars per year hitting the road. Now that's 76 million, not everyone's buying a new car, but that's feeding through into used cars in 3 years, 5 years' time. 10 years' time, you're starting to talk about teenagers on their first car when they're learning to drive. So there's a lot of cars that are coming through. And again, if you're in early, and I don't mean being first, if you're in early, you can be one of the experiences that people go to. A great example of this is an app called A Better Route Planner. This is an app that was written, it's an alternative to Google Maps for route planning, and most people in here would think, why on earth would you write a route planner when Google Maps exists? There are two reasons. Firstly, it can work in environments where Google services are not available. Secondly, it does car-specific things like EV chargers and things like that. They are doing deals, or they have done a deal 2 years ago with Polestar to be pre-bundled, and they're going great. So this is a kind of time when you want to be looking at automotive. This is when you want to get in, when it's still early days and you can still establish a good name for yourself. If you go on the Play Store and look for the number of compatible apps with Android Automotive OS, you'll see one page that says it's about 35. Other pages are sort of 40, 50. Some numbers are 200 to 300. That's not a lot of apps. We've got good search systems. People will find your apps. And car manufacturers, I'm working with some who are spending large amounts of time and have several people going to companies and communities and saying, if you're willing to develop for us, we will support you and help you what we can, in any way we can, and we will look at bundling for you. So Android Automotive OS. This is the embedded one. This is on the head unit. You don't have any of the setup problems. You don't have any of the dropouts because there is no connection that you manage or is reliant on Bluetooth or Wi-Fi Direct or any of those technologies. The problem of getting Android Automotive OS working reliably is one for the car manufacturer. And when the car manufacturers are looking at 50, 60, 70, 80,000 euro cars, which is what Android Automotive tends to be in these days, they're going to put a lot of effort into making sure that it's a stable experience. It's within their interest. I personally know people who've handed back cars that have had bad infotainment systems. It's a big issue. It is a recognized issue. And it is something that the auto manufacturers have gone from 2 or 3 years ago thinking, oh yeah, we can do this Android thing like phones. And they've now reached that place of going, we need to put effort in. It needs to be a good experience. We need to make sure when people have apps running in the car, they are getting the kind of experience we want to be associated with our 50, 60, 70,000 pound product, our car. So Android Automotive OS isn't that much different from Android. It's not some fantastic different thing that's lurking under the Android branding. There are a set of car apps. There are some car APIs, none of which you have to use. And there's a thing called a vehicle HAL, which is largely interfacing into the vehicle's components. The vehicle HAL is, again, something you don't have to use. These are all things that are additions to Android rather than taking things away from Android. There tends to be a different launcher because you're dealing with an experience at arm's length rather than something where people will bring a phone up close to their face. But still, it is Android under the hood. Many of your best love APIs will still be available. Some of the versions of Android are old. Some of them can go back to 9, 10, 11. I'm seeing companies talking about launching 12 in the next year, next 2 years, possibly 13 after that. So the pace of iteration is not as quick, and you don't get new versions as quickly as you would on a phone or a tablet. And that's something to bear in mind. If you're always using the latest Android APIs and the latest Android features, you may find that it doesn't work well in a car purely because the car is 2 versions behind. And this doesn't necessarily track that the car manufacturers will always take the best release. When I talk about Android manufacturers shipping Android 12, I'm talking Android 12. I'm not talking 12L. None of the widescreen stuff that came in 12L or 12.1 or API level 32, whichever one you want to call it, they are shipping Android 12. And this is another diagram. This comes from Google's training pages. This just highlights the green is Android. It's Android as running on your phone. The blue are things that get added, and the orange, or the kind of orangey, pinky, purpley colour, I'm never sure what to call that, is the additions. They're your apps. It's the same way as Android, you'd have third-party apps. There's nothing magical here. There's no scary things. There's nothing to stop you going ahead and implementing Android technologies using Android automotive apps, using Android Studio, using your favorite debugger, using your favorite tools, putting Firebase in for Crashlytics and performance monitoring and all that kind of stuff. So many of the talks you'll hear today can apply easily to Android and automotive as much as anything else. And if you're interested in getting into the lower level nitty-gritty stuff, there's a talk later today by Effie who's going to do a great dive on how to deal with the AOSP and things like that. So if you want to get into firmware stuff, pop along to her talk later. She'll give you a great overview and a great insight into those lower level secrets. So this is what a lot of Android automotive OS systems end up looking like. You have the car hardware. You then on top of that usually have a real-time operating system. When people talk to you about being worried about Android being responsible for unlocking the doors of their car, that I've yet to see a manufacturer who's doing that. There is usually a real-time operating system that talks to the various components in the car that you don't have access to, that is responsible for ensuring that doors open, safety features happen, airbags inflate, all of this kind of stuff. If your app is running and maxing out all the cores, you are not going to stop the airbag deploying. Do not worry about this. Real-time operating systems differ from operating systems like Android by the fact that you can mathematically prove that there is enough capacity to deal with all of the load coming in. So car manufacturers do a lot of work to prove that the hardware they're running a real-time operating system on can do all of this stuff and will not be impacted by your app. And you'll see some companies will talk about Android running in a hypervisor. Qualcomm, our great friends who produce Snapdragon chips that are almost in every phone that you look at, they produce an automotive set of hardware which runs QNX as a real-time operating system and then runs Android in a virtual machine or in a hypervisor. They do that so that if there are issues with dealing with safety components in the car, the amount of resources given to the Android system can be scaled back, and you may see your apps lag a bit, but I hope there's no one in this room who would rather see their app running at the full performance than see an airbag deploy. And in terms of adoption, it's everywhere. These are big names. There are more big names. I know that there are names that are not on this list who are adopting Android Automotive OS. I've always got to remember the OS. Android Auto and Android Automotive OS, whoever named those, I would love them to revisit their decisions. So there are manufacturers not on this, big manufacturers. That 100 to 150 million increase in Android Auto, the 50 million is going to be a low figure going forwards. You're going to see 60, 70, 80 million cars year on year added to the potential user base you can access. So Android Automotive OS is the thing that will give you the reliability that sometimes is missing from Android Auto. Things like letterboxing will happen if you say your app should be portrait mode and the car is in landscape mode. But unlike Android Auto, that's something to do with the car as a platform. With Android Auto, you can't necessarily know that next year's Honda is going to project Android Auto in landscape and letterbox it. Whereas with Android Automotive OS, you are essentially dealing with another device. You have the same challenges, you have the same concerns. You have to make sure you support the aspect ratio, you have to have landscape layouts, all those kind of things to avoid a bit of a sucky user experience. And car manufacturers are also spending a lot of time working on audio latency. So if you want to do something like a game that is a lot of audio feedback, whereas before that may have been a bit difficult to get it into a car, they're working a lot to make these systems better. They don't always get it right. I don't know if some of you saw the first ID.3s that Volkswagen launched. It had an infotainment system that lagged. They have improved it. They've got better, but they don't always get it right first time. And sometimes it takes developers like yourselves to give them feedback and say, hey, what you're doing, I can understand why, but here's a better option. And this is one of the things that Snap Automotive does, is we work with car manufacturers and say, hey, you're coming from the point of view of the car, we're coming from the point of view of Android. let's try and make this the best thing we can get. Let's not just have you take a third-party supplier, stick it in your car, and hope for the best. The apps market for Android Automotive OS is smaller. There are 10 models with Android Automotive OS. It supports the templated system, so if you are worried about the number of users, doing a templated app to start and then going full on Android Automotive OS could be a good approach. But still, this is an early market. This is not going away. All of the plans I've seen from multiple large manufacturers, Android Automotive OS is going to play a part of their strategy for the next 3 to 5 years. And if it proves the benefits that they believe it will in reduced number of employees maintaining their own OSs, their own head units, less need to maintain their own apps, so basically cutting their costs to producing a car, there's no reason why it won't carry on from there. The 3 to 5 years is about one cycle of development for automotive manufacturers. So the big question is, do you need gas? This has a slightly different meaning to Android Automotive OS developers. Gas is Google's automated services. It's the equivalent of the Play services for cars. So it has all of your best loved friends. It has Maps. It has a Play Store. It has a Google Assistant and all this kind of stuff. But it's referred to as gas. So if you see folk talking about gasless cars in terms of Android head units, they don't mean the cars running on fresh air or electricity. They are talking about not having Google services. And that is a thing. One of the issues with gas and Google services is China. There are a lot of car manufacturers who sell into China and sell the same model around the world. They want to sell a model of car and have people know that if you got into, say, an Audi e-tron in the UK and then you hired one in China, you would get the same experience because people hire cars they're familiar with. So they don't want you getting in your e-tron in China and suddenly going, I hired an e-tron because I knew how to use the maps and all of those kind of things. And this is why there are some big manufacturers who are going non-gas. Many of the Chinese manufacturers don't have gas and are looking to adopt gas for some markets, but not having Google automotive services is a far more common thing in cars than it is not having Play services on phones. So this is kind of what gas and non-gas looks like. It's very much templated for gas. Gasless, this is last year's version of the Snap Automotive product. It's open for everything. You can do whatever you want. Google put restrictions on what automotive manufacturers can do. So without those restrictions, there are car manufacturers who are trying to make Android Automotive OS not look like Android and look like their cars from a few years ago to not disturb users' experiences. So you might find that in 6 months, a year's time, there are car manufacturers who say, oh, by the way, and if you bought a car after this day, we can enable Android Automotive in your car. And when it's enabled, it may not look any different because they've spent hundreds of engineering hours making Android not look like Android. It may seem very odd to a lot of people that you do that, but for them, their selling point, their 50, 60, 70,000 euros comes from the car. It doesn't come from having Android in the car. So as I mentioned, gas is the in-car equivalent of Play services. It really isn't the take it for granted. And when you write non-gas apps, lots of car manufacturers love you. Non-gas apps, there are multiple companies who are suppliers to motor manufacturers who are relying on non-gas apps. So this is Faurecia Aptoid and Harman. Neither of those produce cars in their own right. They are both companies who have app stores. I'm aware of others. This is a thing. They have realized that when you don't have Google Play because you haven't got gas, you are not going to have an app distribution store. You're not going to have app distribution for updates for your apps. There are a whole bunch of challenges. And this is why they're producing these gasless stores. These are doing quite well. They've been proving quite popular, but if you install apps from either of these, they assume you haven't got Google Automotive gas in the system. And if you try and use Google's services, you may actually get taken straight out of their store. And at the OEM level, you just go crazy. Do what you want. If you do a deal with an OEM, they'll have designers and all sorts of folks working with you, but you may find that they're looking for a game, and you could write an arcade game. You could write anything. We're aware of manufacturers who are looking for vehicle-specific games, and some ideas that have been floated are you pit stop your car in the game, and then you have to get out, open the car driver's seat, go around, open the passenger seat, shut the doors, get back in, those kind of things. Gimmicky as hell, but it makes for a lovely demo when you're actually on a automotive show, when you're on the floor. So apps for Auto and Android Automotive OS. I'm going to go through this quite quickly. Google have some great documentation on it, and I would recommend starting with GAS because there is so much good documentation there. They have a code snippet. This shows you how within one app you will be able to tell whether you're running on the template host in the car or on a template host on a phone, in case you want to do things slightly differently. But it reinforces the point that you can write these templated apps and they will run on both. It's not a case of Android Auto is one system, Android Automotive OS is a completely different system. You can have this commonality. You have the templates. These are, again, designed to be distraction-free. Google's templating system is designed for in-motion apps. And what you don't want is users spending time poking at a screen, trying to interact with things, whilst driving down a motorway at 70 miles an hour. They have some constraints on them, of course, because they're distraction-free. There's a limited set of templates. There's only so much work they can do. Google are expanding this. This year's I/O, I think they announced the dynamic updating of data for things like delivery apps and that kind of stuff. It's an ever-moving market. They want to know what they need to implement to give people functionality. If there are use cases for on-the-move apps that are distraction-free for the driver, and you can't do them with the templates, the guys at Google are really open about feedback. They'd love to know it because this is how they stay in the car and how they stay relevant. So there's also limited customization. One of the things with the templates is you will give up a lot of your branding. So you'll find that you may end up being branded by a automotive manufacturer. So you may find that your app has got Audi branding in one car and Renault branding in another car and BMW branding in another car. That's part of the templates. That's what you give up. And of course, there's the constraints on what can be shown. So now we go into Android Automotive OS. It's an immersive experience. By that, I mean you're no longer restricted by the templates. You can take people into a full app. If someone is parked charging their car and they want to find a hotel locally, you can run a tablet app. And you treat it very, very much the same as a tablet. It's streaming, gaming, those kind of things are where a lot of the automotive manufacturers are thinking. They're looking at other use categories, smart home, for example, doing apps where you can set up routines where you're saying, if I'm driving and I'm within 5 miles of home and I've set my destination to be my home, turn my lights on in my porch so that I can see when I get home where the front door is. And electric vehicle charger time is the thing that's kind of driving this. They're expecting folk to have to spend more time in their car not driving. It's not the fact that they expect you to spend the whole time in the car not driving, but they expect there to be an opportunity to make charging less of a dull experience. So when you're developing for Android Automotive OS, the hardware, of course, is the big thing. And there are lots of different types. There are crazy ideas like this. I've talked to companies who are looking at 4 screens in one vehicle. How those screens interact and how you deal with them, it depends on whether you want to go down the route of doing 4-screen customization. For most cases, there is one central screen that will be interacted with. Some add passenger side screens, some add rear seat entertainment. Some of the rear seat entertainment is literally an Amazon Fire Stick plugged into an LCD display. But for those, it's nice and easy because it's a separate system. There are others who are looking at powering all 4 displays from one central system. This is what we use when we're developing. We've got a tablet. We buy a £30 coffee cup tablet holder, stick a tablet in it, have someone drive around and have someone else use the tablet. Please do not buy a coffee cup holder and try and play with the tablet while you're driving. This may not end well. Rear seat entertainment, as I mentioned, you've got just a screen. It's just like a Fire TV. The only thing is that people won't be using remote controls. They will be tapping at these devices. And there's lots of car data you can get. There is a set of car properties. If you want to, you can get vehicle speed, tyre pressures, door status, fuel status, all this kind of stuff, if you want to. Your app doesn't have to use this. They don't have to use car APIs. They don't have to use the car properties. But it is there in case you want to do something very car specific. The only issue is you may get the permissions dialog. But as Android developers, you will probably find plenty of information on dealing with permissions in Android apps. And Android Automotive OS is exactly the same. This is a better route planner. These are the guys who've managed to do some great deals by focusing on cars and shipping stuff. And occasionally you do get the allow, deny, dismiss permission box pop up if you're trying to run it on a device that doesn't have explicit permissions granted for it. And when you're dealing with the Android Automotive OS, if you talk to the OEM, and you're working with OEMs, everything's up for grabs. Launcher screens, setting screens. As I was saying, a lot of the manufacturers are trying to make Android not look like Android, and they do that by customizing the launcher to look like a last year model car, or customizing the setting screen so it's accessed in the same way as they access the setting screen on their embedded Linux systems. So I'm going to share a few tips. We're running to the end of the talk. I'm going to run quickly through these. Car versus phone UI. Some things do not work well in a car. Biggest one is logging into services. If you have a login to access a service, you can try and get someone to tap at arm's length on a software keyboard. What may be a better thing is to show a QR code or a URL that someone can go to and associate the car with their account. So QR codes, easy to scan, easy to set up, but there is a lot you can push off onto someone's phone where they can bring it up to a comfortable distance for them and associate it with, associate their account with it, or they might want to use deep linking so that the QR code will go straight into the app and associate the device without even having to enter login details. This whole connected app experience is something car manufacturers love, by the way. Most of the car UIs are landscape. Booking.com I'm going to call out. They're nice guys, but they have a portrait app. So in a car, it's letterbox. It's not a great experience. They're working on tablet apps. We know it. I know it. They are addressing this. Part of the reason being cars. And as I was saying, you've got to think about your tap targets being at arm's length. You're no longer in a situation where a small tap target, someone's going to bring the phone to their face. No one's moving their central console to the face, and very few people stick their face into the central console. Usually that results in a call to emergency services if they do, and an ambulance turning up shortly afterwards. So think about larger tap targets. The tablet in the coffee cup holder is great because it gives you that arm's length ability, and you can see whether a tap target might be too small when you're driving down some cobbled streets or you're parking somewhere. So you can test on emulators. No one is expecting you to have a car. You can buy every car that's got Android Automotive if you want to, but it's far better, far easier to test on an emulator or a tablet. We at Snap Automotive, we use tablets. We have a tablet build of Android Automotive. That's what's in the coffee cup holder. We can tweak it. And we do have designers who, we also have our own firmware and app distribution system. And we have designers who go out onto the road. They use our app distribution system to update the apps, and they'll drive around with their tablet trying things. It's a really eye-opening experience because you get network errors when you're out on the road. You get kind of blank spots of signal. You get the real-life use cases of a cobbled street is a nightmare to try and hit most touch targets with. And the interactions that you have on the road mean that if a driver is looking somewhere, they are not going to be interacting with your tablet. So if you've got a touch target and someone's looking somewhere else when you expect them to use it, so say en route when you expect them to be looking for a hotel, that's not going to work. So it's always useful to do these kind of things as a passenger, as a user experience test, to make sure what you're offering actually works. So unfortunately, we've got 4 minutes. I'm going to wrap the talk up now because Q&A is always good. As I said, my Twitter address is on this screen. Thank you very much for listening. Hopefully it's been useful, and please ping me on Twitter, or I'm going to be around today. Grab me, feel free to chat about cars, and if you want to give me a free car to test any bugs, please let me know.